Hi there, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to share my monthly workshop with you. If you love texture, if you love sunflowers and layering details that pop, I think you're really going to love this workshop. I'm going to be featuring some of my favorite supplies this month. Of course, I could not resist, if you know me, I could not resist using this gorgeous 3D sunflower embossing folder, and I'm going to show you different ways to use this on your scrapbook pages. I'm going to bring in the Cornflower Bundle, so we're going to shape and create these beautiful cornflowers together. And I'm also going to use the dies from the Impressions Abloom set. Everything is going to be grounded with this gorgeous DSP. This is the Floral Impressions. I wish I could show you the entire pack, but you know what? I've used most of it in this workshop. You know what? Let's take a look at those layouts. I think you're really going to love them. Let's take a look at layout number 1, and I really love the way this turned out. This layout screams summer days to me, or end of summer days, and these large cornflowers are definitely the showstopper. But let's take a look at some of the details. So do you see my title? I'm going to show you how I achieve that beautiful look. And do you see this gorgeous, gorgeous border right here? I'm going to show you how I did that too. I love this layout. It's perfect, again, for those warm summer days. Let's take a look at how I created these gorgeous cornflowers. They are super easy to put together, and the results, as you can see, is pretty stunning. I did also bring in this die set here. I actually have the stamp and die, but I'm mainly concentrating on using these dies here, and these are these smaller flowers that really complement and finish these clusters. Now, if you're looking for monthly scrapbooking inspiration, I've teamed up with my very good friend Chelsea, and we bring you beautiful scrapbooking workshops every single month. We each take a turn, and this month was my turn, and I could not resist, if you know me, to bring in beautiful summer sunflower pages to our monthly offering. If you follow both Chelsea and I, you will notice that we often use the same products. So although I have a lot of products here that I'm going to share with you today, if you caught Chelsea's video from last month, she did bring in this stamp set here, and I thought, you know what? It was the perfect complement for my scrapbook page today. Let's take a look on how these gorgeous cornflowers came together. Let's create this beautiful flower together. I do like to stamp first, so I stamp my image and then I die cut. I did use the pecan pie to stamp the image. I just find that it's easier to line up everything and then die cut it after. Everybody has their preference. Here I'm showing you that we're going to fold this, and we're not going to cut the back off because it gives extra strength and dimension to your flower. Both of these have been cut on the light side of Darling Duckling. Here I'm showing you that little centerpiece that was done using Very Vanilla on the light side. So I'm going to bring in my sticky mat here, and we're going to start adding some ink to these pieces. I find that it looks really, really good, and it creates that dimension we need. I'm going to start with Darling Duckling. I'm going to move to crushed curry, and then you'll see we'll go through all of the steps. So even if you do that pounce mark, it doesn't really show because you're starting right at the top, and we're going to layer this piece. So go ahead and ink away. I'm trying to keep the bottom light. I want to have that gradient from light to dark. I'm going to move here to crushed curry and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to add some ink. And again, even if I'm pouncing on that top part, we're never going to see this once we layer everything up. We're going to bring in a little bit of pecan pie because the center is going to be brown. And we're going to add just a really light touch. Do you see how I'm holding my brush? I'm holding the brush, not the head. And that gives me the right pressure to have a nice soft blend. Do you see that? It's really pretty. And that's the perfect shadow I need in the back of this piece. Now we're going to repeat the same steps for this top layer. We're going to start with Darling Duckling, and I'm going in circular motions here. And you know what? Be careful when you do that, because you could damage those petals. They are extremely detailed, so maybe just kind of brush down. Here I'm showing you that I want to keep the bottom light, so I'm not going all the way down to the bottom of this piece. I'm going to come back here with some crushed curry, and you can see that this color is quite dark. It will dry back like any other ink. We're going to come in with a little bit of that pecan pie, and I always start at the top because then I can gauge the pressure I need to add the ink on this piece. We're going to add a little bit of early espresso to finish this off, because this is the top layer, and you'll see that by simply adding ink to this piece, you get that really nice dimension. Let's take a look. Doesn't look like much here. We still have to do the center. So let's bring in that center. This is done again in very vanilla on the light side. And I'm going to go in with a little bit of pecan pie at the top. Now you're probably going to need a little bit more ink here because you're starting with a light piece, but that's fine because you can control as much as you want on or as little. So I do like to go in layers so that I don't overdo it, but I'm brushing that in and you can see that it looks really good. I'm going to swap out my mats here for my piercing mat. I find that this mat is perfect for paper shaping. So here I'm using a fondant tool. If you don't have this tool, you can definitely use your bone folder, but do you see how by just rubbing it on the back side, it gives it this really cool curve and dimension. We're going to do the same thing with this one, and I'm just pulling up gently. Again, there's a lot of details on this piece, so be mindful when you're doing this that you don't rip this piece because it is delicate. Now I'm just running the tool right at the base, and see all the dimension and lift you get. It's that simple. It really is that easy. We are going to fold this and glue it together. Again, I'm not cutting the back because I do like that it gives it more stability, and it also gives it a little bit more depth if you want. I'm adding a generous amount of glue all on the edges. And what you have to be mindful of here is to line up the bottom. So make sure that you squeeze that in and your bottom are lined up, because that's what's going to show in the end. I'm going to flatten that out, and then I'm going to add my top piece. Now I don't want to add too many dimensionals because this is going into a scrapbook. So we're going to add some more glue right here at the very top, and we're going to add that top layer. Now what's important here is that you want to line up the top. If you don't, you can trim that down, but you should be fine if you line up the top of the flower. For this one, I will put in some dimensions because I do want it to stay up when it's in my scrapbook, but I didn't want to add too many layers. So we're going to add 2 here, and we're going to do the same thing. When we add this to the flower, what's important is to line up the top. Again, if it doesn't line up properly, you can always trim off the top, but there you have it, a very pretty flower that is ready to be added to your scrapbook page. Let's take a look at the smaller flowers very quickly. These were die cut on the light side of very vanilla, and I'm going to go in here with peach pie, and I'm going right in the center. I'm not going to show you here how to do the center piece. That's just done with early espresso. I want to show you how effective it is just to add a little bit of ink and doing just a tiny bit of dimension. So I'm going to use my tool. I'm going to rub it right in the center. You see how that lifts up? I'm going to fold it over. I'm going to pull back on each of the leaves. This is going to help each of the petals curl down. You can always use your fingers or a bone folder. I'm just trying to have them curl in, as you can see, and then I'm pushing in the center and giving it a little bit more dimension and style. I think it looks really good. Let's take a look at this gorgeous border right here. I love how simple this was, and it looks so good. So this is part of this set right here, and it's this die cut. Although it's not the full length, I'm going to show you how easy it is to take this simple die and translate it into a nice border on your scrapbook page. It's really easy to create, and it just has such a beautiful impact on this layout. Let's take a look on how this came together. We're going to add that really pretty border right here on the edge of the DSP. Now, if you don't want to bother with all of the following steps, you can definitely add a piece of cardstock cut at 1/4 inch, but I think you're really going to want to do this option right here. You're going to cut yourself 4 pieces for each pages, or maybe it's 3 in both colors. You'll see what I mean in 1 second. You're going to line these up, and you're going to straddle the DSP and the base page. I'm going to bring in my silicone mat because I'm using double-sided tape. I find that this keeps everything nice and tidy. I do have a little bit of glue that's kind of sticking on the outer edges, so I'm just going to rub that off with my fingers. You do want adhesive on this entire piece. I just felt that the double-sided tape was faster. Now I'm going to start with this piece, and if you've noticed, I started off the page. I don't want to have a full circle right at the top, and your T-ruler is going to be your friend here. I want to make sure everything is nice and straight before I lay down my next piece. You don't have to overlap them. You just want to make sure that they're nice and tight against each other. And I'm going to bring back my T-ruler to make sure everything is nice and straight. We do want to give it the illusion that it is one continuous piece, and this was the easiest way to do it, by lining everything up. You're going to bring in that second color, which is the base page color, and you're going to add all of those circles inside the frame. That's what gives the illusion of a continuous border, and I think that it looks stunning. Let's take a look at the title that I have here. It's a simple title, but I think that the technique on these letters is what brings it to life, and that was done using this 3D embossing folder. I'm going to share with you how I colored these flowers. I did start with the 3D embossing folder. We are using the deboss side. So the deboss side is the side that goes in. And I'm going to show you how I achieve this really soft look. I especially love how each of my sunflower have this really nice highlight to them. And that's done simply with ink and a very light touch. We're going to start with white cardstock, and I am going to mist it on both sides. I don't want any cracking. That's what gives it that really soft look. I ran this through my embossing folder, and I ran it twice to get a really deep impression. This is a 3D embossing folder, but I think running it twice and adding a little bit of water, you get all of these gorgeous details. We're going to flip it over. We are going to work on the deboss side, and here are the colors that I'm going to use. Now, it is important to follow the order in the color that I'm using because we're overlapping. We're going to start with crushed curry, and I want to give them that really nice highlight, and it's really easy to over ink your piece. So you're going to start with the biggest flower and kind of get a feel for the pressure you need to add to each of your flowers. Instead of going into circular motion, here I am just rubbing up and down on each of the petals. What I'm trying to achieve here is highlights and shadows on all of my flowers. I'm going to tap off the excess, and I'm going to start again. I find that you get your groove when you start with the larger flowers, and I'm running all around this beautiful sunflower, and I am gently adding color. Now I will come back and I will add more color, but Less is more, and layering is possible. You just can't take ink away. Next up is Peach Pie, and I'm going to start with this flower here because it's closed. I kind of get a feeling that this would be a little bit darker, and it gives me a sense of how much ink I have in my ink pad. Just a note here, I did not re-ink my ink pads at all. Like, some of them are a little bit dry, and for this particular technique, it works best because you want to build your color gradually. You don't want to add too much. If you're like me and you have a heavy hand when you are ink blending, then going light for the first coat is the secret to keeping that really nice highlight in your flower. You can always add more ink, you just can't take it away. So I'm trying to add shadows with this secondary color that I'm using, which is Peach Pie, and you'll see how it really nicely builds up. Once you have most of your flowers done, this is where you can come in again and add more dimension. So right here, I want to add a little bit more color to separate the flower that's underneath to give it a little bit more depth. And now that I'm looking at my light areas, I feel that I need to add a little bit more. Let's take a look at the panels side by side. Now you'll see that they're not fully colored in, and that's because, do you see where I'm outlining here? That's going to be for layout number 3. So it's a little bit of a sneak peek because I am going to cut this panel. So I don't need to add all of the green everywhere. I am going to cut these flowers out as well. I do want to add a little bit of green for the closed flowers, so the one on the left hand side. We're going to do that with Old Olive. Now, if you're completing this entire workshop, you're going to need to create 2 of these panels. The first panel is going to be for layout number 1, where you are going to die cut your title or your letters out of it. And then the second one is going to be for layout number 3. But the coloring and the colors that I've used are exactly the same. So do you see how I'm bringing in a little bit of green? Now, you are not going to be perfect here. Here I'm using some of my own brushes from my stash. They are smaller brushes. So if you're using Stampin' Up brushes, you would have to use the smaller ones. I am not trying to separate all of the colors. I am just trying to add color to this panel. We're going to move right along to the color that makes the most difference. Now I'm going to test it. Do you see here on the side? I'm going to see how saturated my brush is because I have done a few of these panels, and I do want to add a little bit of color to the background or the foreground because we're working on the deboss side. This is where the magic happens. Do you see that? By gently going into circular motion over my flower. Now I am pouncing in the center if you want. I'm adding a little bit more pressure in the center. See, I start right here in the middle. I add a little bit more pressure, and then I'm literally going to fan out. I want this to be super, super light. Now I have seen people where they drag their ink all over the top. That's not the look I was going for here. I was going for something really soft because I wanted to keep those highlights. Now you'll see here right at the bottom, again, I'm showing you that I do need to ink in between because we are going to keep one of these panels as solid pieces for layout number 3. So I'm going to go in here, and again, it's not going to be perfect because it's hard to get in there with a blending brush, but that's okay. That's what gives this panel this nice rustic summer vibe. I really do like the way you can do so many techniques with this embossing folder, and this is one of them. It's just a little bit softer. Now that I've gone in and I've done the darkest color, so that was the early espresso, I'm going to bring back my crushed curry. I'm not even going to put ink at this point, but I do want my sunflowers to be nice and vibrant. Had I done this at the beginning, I probably would have put too much ink. So this is what I mean by follow the order into which I've added the inks to this panel, and you will be successful in keeping that really nice light shade on each of those flowers. I think that this is a really easy technique. It just takes a little bit of time and patience and a few layers to put all the colors on here. Let's take a closer look. See how soft that is? As you can see, this layout here is packed with beautiful techniques, beautiful details, and I just love how I was able to bring everything together. Sunflowers and cornflowers are, I'm going to say, cousins, and they play well on this layout. Let's take a look at layout number 2. Now, I did apply a lot of the same techniques, but we have just a slightly different color palette. Now, for this title, I absolutely love the way that this turned out. We're going to use that same embossing folder to die cut our letters. I want to show you in this workshop that even though you're using the same product, it can look completely different. This one here was done with slightly lighter shades, and then I brought in white pigment ink to give it that really cool chalky finish. So let's take a look on how this came together. We're going to start this panel the same way we did the first one. We're going to spritz it on both sides. This is a very deep embossing folder, as you can see here, and by adding water, I do feel that it prevents cracking. We're going to start the ink coloring, and the order in which we do that does matter. We're going to start with Darling Duckling as our first color, and you'll notice that this panel is done slightly different, and it's because of the last step we're going to do together. So I'm still going right in the center. I'm adding all of my ink. I did cut out some of the process because you've seen it for the other panel. I'm going to follow through here with crushed curry, and for this one here I'm being a little bit more messy, if you want, because I know that I'm going to add a layer on the top when I'm done. We're going to move on to Old Olive, and we're going to add ink on all of the leaves. So for this panel in particular, I'm doing the entire thing because I'm going to use it to die cut my title, and I want to have options as to where I can place my letters. Again, here I'm building the base, and I brought in crumb cake just to add to the background or the foreground again. Do you see how it's picking up on the top? I'm not necessarily trying to color in the sunflowers at this point. I'm just trying to kind of blend out the background of the panel. We're going to bring in early espresso for that, and you'll see that I'm going to add a little bit more here. So I'm going to go right in the center, and we're going to add that to the flower. I find that this is where the magic happens because it picks up on all of that dimension. But you'll also see where I'm adding quite a bit more ink. I'm not concentrating yet too much on the center. It's kind of bleeding out onto the flower. And you'll see why this is important when we add our final layer. I love the way that by simply adding ink to this embossing folder, you can create all of these different looks. Okay, I think we're done here, and do you see how I definitely have more ink? This panel is a little bit more messy if you want. So if you want to start with this one to kind of get your groove, the first panel was a little bit more delicate. So I'm going to bring in my old friend here from close to my heart. It is white pigment ink, so whatever pigment ink you have. And we're going to run this across the entire panel. Now, this step is kind of important. You want to do this when the ink is still somewhat wet, because that's what makes it look so great. The ink at the bottom is blending in with the top that I'm doing right here, that layered, and it gives it this nice chalky finish. Now you'll see that I'm dragging this as lightly as I can. Remember, I have a heavy hand when I do these types of things, so don't go too fast and build up. You'll get inky during this process, but look how stunning this is. It is absolutely gorgeous. Set it aside, let it dry, and then you can cut your title from it. Isn't this just absolutely stunning? I love how my title turned out. And again, I'm using the same product, just different colors. I did bring back that impression of bloom for these little clusters. Let me bring these nice and close. And they were colored to match the DSP. Again, if you love simple details like this one right here, this is just simply paper tearing. I folded that piece of white core up and I added a little bit of ink. So what I love about white core cardstock is that not only do you see the white core, but in this case here, you can color it and it looks really, really great. So this is layout number 2. I've used a lot of the same products, just a different color combination. Let's take a look at layout number 3. Let's take a look at this last layout. I really love the way that this turned out. Now, if you're interested in the assembly guide, I will put all of the information down in the description box below. It comes with full cutting instruction, photo placement, embellishing tips, close-up photos. This is a perfect time saver tool if you want to recreate these pages as is, or you're looking for inspiration on how to use the products that you already have. Now let's take a look at this last layout, and I want to draw your eye to how I used once again that gorgeous embossing folder. I just love this one so much that I wanted to incorporate it on all of my pages, but I also wanted to show you different ways to use it. Now there is fussy cutting involved, and if you know me, I'm not a fan of fussy cutting, but sometimes it just has to happen. I love the way that this anchors this layout beautifully. It plays off on the gorgeous DSP at the back. And I couldn't resist but bring in one last way to use this embossing folder. And I want to show you what I have left. So this is how I've cut all of my titles. I usually keep the title all lined up so that the pattern is continuous. This almost looks like an embossed leather type look. I really love the way it turned out. It was super easy. I did some embossing. I did some sanding to reveal some of that white core, and once again I brought in some pecan pie. I added to the top so that I could kind of ink up, if you want, that white core, and it gave me this gorgeous look that you have on this page. To finish everything off, I use these low profile dots. So you can see that I have a few here and there. I don't have a lot because you know what? I don't think that this layout needs a whole bunch. I love the way that this workshop turned out. I hope that I've inspired you. Let's bring in the other layouts. I think even though I'm using a lot of the same products, yes, it has a common look and feel, but you can see that all of the pages are slightly different. Let's bring in the first one here. I love all of my titles, and I wanted to bring out this one here. So this one is a stamp set that I purchased a while ago, and I got the idea for my title from the stamp set, but I really wanted to use the party dies and the emboss kind of look. This workshop is filled with tons of techniques and details. Maybe you don't want to take the time to do the embossing and the coloring. I was able to hollow out the center of layout number 3. So this came out of this piece right here. You could always use this gorgeous paper to die cut your titles. I wanted to use this embossing folder in many ways in this workshop, from die cutting my title here to using it as a large embellishment. As you can see here, I think that this embossing folder is perfect for scrapbook layouts. I hope that you found some inspiration today to use all of those beautiful sunflowers and cornflowers. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments down below. I love to chat with you there. If you're interested in any of my other workshops, click this playlist right here. Have yourself a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.